কৃপা বলে পাই চৈতন্য নিতাই। তব কৃপা বলে পাই চৈতন্য নিতাই। স্বরূপ সনাতন রূপ রঘুনাথ সনাতন স্বরূপ সনাতন রূপ রঘুনাথ যুগ শ্রী জীবা নবুলকানাথ দয়া কর শ্রী আচার্য প্রভু শ্রীনিবাস দয়া করো শ্রী আচার্য প্রভু শ্রীনিবাস দয়া করো শ্রী আচার্য প্রভু শ্রীনিবাস रामचंद्र संगमगे नरोत्तम दास रामचंद्र संगमगे नरोत्तम दास श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु दया करो मोरे श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु दया करो मोरे चैतन्य प्रभु दया करो मोरे
Oh, okay, the choice. You play Mridanga, no? I'll play harmony. Thank you. Yeah, that will be better actually. Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Jashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana 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 Jamuna Tera Vanachari Yamuna Jamuna Tera Vanachari Yamuna Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana 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 Jamuna Tera Vanacharya Jamuna Tera Vanacharya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Jayam Vishwapad Paramahansa Parivrajakaacharya Stottra Siddha Shishimad His Divine Grace Abhay Charanarvind Bhakti Vedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai Sri Sri Gaurnitai Ki Jai Sri Sri Kishore Kishori Ki Jai Sri Sri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ki Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Granthraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Samaveta Bhaktavind Ki Jai Nitai Go Primanandi Hari Hari Bo Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya So today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 2, called Hiranyakashipu, King of the Demons. Text number 35. Please repeat. Evam vilapatinam vai parigrihya mritam patim anichchatinam nirharam arkostam sanyavartata evam vilapatinam vai parigrihya patim anichchatinam nirharam arkostam sanyavartata evam vilapatinam vai parigrihya patim anichchatinam nirharam arkostam sanyavartata evam vilapatinam vai parigrihya patim anichchatinam nirharam arkostam sanyavartata evam vilapatinam vai parigrihya patim anichchatinam nirharam arkostam sanyavartata evam vilapatinam vai parigrihya patim Anshatinam nirhara Harkostam sanyavartata. Ladies. Evam vilapatinam vaye Parigrihya mritam patim Anachatinam nirharam Harkostam sanyavartata. Evam vilapatinam vaye Parigrihya mritam patim Anichatinam nirharam Harkostam sanyavartata. Evam, thus, Vilapatinam, of the lamenting queens, Vai, indeed, Parigrihya, taking on their laps, Mritam, the dead, Patim, husband, Anichatinam, not desiring, Nirharam, the carrying out of the body for the funeral ceremony, Arka, the sun, Astam, the setting position, Sanyavartata, passed away. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The time was appropriate for the body to be burned, but the queens, not allowing it to be taken away, continued lamenting for the dead body, which they kept on their laps. In the meantime, the sun completed its movements for setting in the west. Purport. According to the Vedic system, if a person dies during the daytime, it is customary for his funeral ceremony to be performed before the sun sets, regardless of whether he is burned or buried. And if he dies at night, the funeral must be completed before the next sunrise. Apparently, the queens continued lamenting for the dead body, the lump of matter, and would not allow it to be taken away for burning. This illustrates the strong grip of illusion among foolish persons who consider the body the self. Women are generally considered less intelligent. Because of ignorance only, the queens thought of the dead body as their husband, and somehow or other thought that if the body were kept, their husband would remain with them. Such a conception of the self is certainly for Gokara, cows and asses. We have actually seen that sometimes when a cow's calf has died, the milkman cheats the cow by presenting before her the dead body of her calf. Thus, the cow, who would not otherwise allow milking, licks the dead body of the calf and allows herself to be milked. This substantiates the description of the Shastra that a foolish man in the bodily concept of life is like a cow. Not only do foolish men and women consider the body the self, but we have even seen that the dead body of a so-called yogi was kept for days by his disciples, who thought that their guru was in samadhi. When decomposition began and a bad smell unfortunately began to overwhelm the yogic power, the disciples allowed the dead body of the so-called yogi to be burned. Thus, the bodily concept of life is extremely strong among foolish persons who are compared to cows and asses. Nowadays, great scientists are trying to freeze dead bodies so that in the future, these frozen bodies may again be brought to life. The incident narrated by Hiranyakashipu from history must have taken place millions of years ago, because Hiranyakashipu lived millions of years ago and was even then quoting from history. Thus, the incident occurred before Hiranyakashipu's lifetime, but the same ignorance in the bodily concept of life is still prevalent, not only among laymen, but even among scientists who think that they will be able to revive frozen corpses. Apparently, the queens did not want to deliver the dead body for burning because they were afraid of dying with the dead body of their husband. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So, when the Pandavas, Maharaj Yudhishthira and his brothers, are in the forest in exile, then there's this well-known incident where they come to a lake, and when they're very thirsty, and as each of the brothers goes to drink water, there's a spirit, there's a yaksha, the voice in the lake that forbids them from drinking that water and tells them that they have to answer his questions first before they're allowed to drink. Otherwise, they will drop dead. And each of the brothers ignores the warning, drinks the water, and drops dead. Of course, not forever. They will be revived later. But this happens for 4 brothers until the 5th one, the eldest, Maharaj Yudhishthira, comes to drink water, sees the fate of his brothers, and agrees to answer the questions of the yakshas. And there are many questions that are asked, wonderful questions. In the Mahabharata, there's a long list of these different questions, some of which are quite famous. But there's a couple that are especially famous, and one of them is the yaksha asks Maharaj Yudhishthira, what is the most amazing thing in this world? And Maharaj Yudhishthira's answer, he says, is Ahan yahani bhutani gachantiha yamalayam sthavaram shesham icchanti shesha sthavaram icchanti kim ascharya matah param. Ahan yahani bhutani, ahani bhutani, all living entities day by day, gachantiha yamalayam, they're all going to death, they're all dying, they're going to the abode of Yama. But Shesha, those who are left behind, sthavaram icchanti, they think that they will never die. Somehow there will be an exception made for them. And they strive to live forever. Kim ascharyam atah param. Beyond this, what could be more amazing? Right? So he doesn't mention the Taj Mahal, or, well, it didn't exist at that time, or the, Mount Everest or anything like that as most amazing. What people typically have in their bucket lists of things to see before they die. Rather, he regards something as most amazing that is perhaps the most common thing around us. Namely, all the time we read in the news about people dying. All the time we see that people close to us are dying. And sometimes that hits very, very close to us, and yet we still feel that somehow I will escape from it. And even if we don't think that, so you talk to someone and they say, you know you'll have to die, they'll say, yeah, I know. But we behave as if we will live forever. Right? And so therefore, we don't actually realize it, even though we say we realize it. But in fact, our behavior is such that we pretend as if the plans I'm making now will last me forever. And this is how much every little thing matters to us. If someone insults us or praises us, it's a big deal because we think this is something that I'm going to live with forever. Right? Not realizing that time and tide, they will take away everything and anything with just a moment's notice. So how many people here have seen a dead body before? Okay, almost everyone. How many people have watched someone die? The process of death. Yeah. Okay, human beings? No? Yeah. How many people have actually watched or burned the body of a loved one? So, first of all, seeing a dead body in itself is a huge eye-opener because we live in a society, typically, that tries to cover up the scene of death as quickly as possible. So the first thing that happens when someone dies is what? They show up with a cover, a shroud, and cover the whole body in the scene immediately, so that no one might be able to see the body as dead. If you're in a hospital ever and you see the stretcher, empty stretcher, being carried from one floor to another, there's a good chance that stretcher is not empty. Rather, if you look below, there's another shelf covered, where often they will transport a body that has died. But never in a visible fashion, because death is too difficult to digest. What happens is when you see death itself, it creates a sense of vairagya or detachment from the world that is unavoidable, even in someone who's not a spiritualist or a religious person, because you come face to face with the temporality, with the mortality of life in this world. I remember in my own life, there's one time where I had the opportunity, and really one can say the privilege, of being with someone from the time they were dying to the time that we cremated their body. And this was my grandfather on my mother's side of the family. And it just so happened that I was there in the morning when I heard shouting coming from, we were visiting actually his home because we don't live in India. We were visiting his home, this is in Allahabad, and I heard shouting coming from the living room, and this was early in the morning. I was I think still not bathed or showered or anything, but I heard this shouting coming from the living room and someone calling my name, and so I got up and ran into the living room, and there found my grandfather on the floor. And he was what appeared to be having a heart attack. That's what we assumed because he was a heart patient. And no one could find the medicine that heart patients keep to arrest the heart attack. Typically, he would keep one in his pocket, one in his bedroom, one thing of medicine in the car. But for some reason, that day, no one could find the medicine. And so everyone, my uncle, his son, was running around to look for this medicine. And he was there, left alone, in the living room floor. And so I thought, okay, better than I run around also. I clearly don't know this house where things are kept. Let me stay with him. And so I put his head on my lap and saw what was happening. All kinds of unusual sounds coming from his mouth. And he started to bite his tongue and so on. And so I just started chanting very loudly in his ears, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare. And telling him, grandfather, please remember Krishna, please remember Krishna, please chant if you can. And to my amazement, he started to mouth those words. Voice couldn't come out anymore, but he was trying to speak those words. He was a very wonderful devotee, actually, from his childhood, very, very pious family. But later on in life, as a result of my parents' encouragement, he started chanting 16 rounds every day. And he had very nice habits where he would wake up early in the morning for Mangalarti. On his own, he would go through a whole routine of worshipping the deity at home, chanting all his rounds. And this point at which this happened, he had just finished chanting all his japa that morning, and he was beginning the puja, the worship in the temple, in the home temple, and was carrying this plate of flowers that he had just picked for the Lord. And so on the ground were all these flowers scattered around. And at that point, he fell just outside the door of the Lord's temple. So what a place to leave your body. What a condition to give up this body. And in terms of death, who could ask for a better form of death than that? All around, the living room is more like a courtyard. It's kind of open on one side. And all around, just outside, are tulsi trees planted. Again, something that was traditionally part of the home, as well as a cow that's kept in the courtyard and taken care of. So, Gomata, mother cow, tulsi leaves, Krishna's worship, the holy name, all were present at this time. Clearly, Krishna had arranged everything for this person's departure. But you know, in Srimad Bhagavatam, how it's described. I don't know if you've read how when a person leaves their body, they make a certain sound from their throat. The final 3 breaths that a person takes are very, very different, very distinct from any breath and any sound that a human being makes in their whole lifetime. Just like a child's first cry from when he or she comes out of the mother's womb is a very special sound that the parents recognize immediately as the cry of my child. Right? It's a sound that they wait to hear. And it's a sound that never happens again. Right? It's a very special, particular cry that a child makes first coming out into this world. So similarly, the sound that a person makes, the Bhagavatam describes at the time of death, it's kind of gur, 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 it's approximated, it's described like this. That sound is not replicable. No one can imitate it, and it never happens at any other point in life. It's the sound of the living entity, the vital airs of the body leaving the body itself. And it was incredible. As I was chanting and I was encouraging him to chant, you could see the senses gradually shut down just in the course of a few moments. And those sounds emerge. And they're simultaneously the most amazing and the most frightening sounds that you can ever hear. Because you can tell that life is leaving, right? That the living entity is leaving from this body. And very quickly, the whole matter was finished and grandfather was gone. After that point, the whole mood changed, right? Up to that point, it's concern. And up to that point, it's worry and don't go, don't leave us. He was very fortunate. There was no one crying around him at that time. In the scriptures, it's described that a person who leaves in a lonely place is actually the most fortunate. Sometimes we think that the nicest way to leave this world is surrounded by your loved ones. But in fact, the Bhagavatam describes that leaving surrounded with your loved ones is a very unfortunate situation because it simply doubles the pain of departure. Because you're being dragged out of your body, which in itself is very painful. There's no such thing as a peaceful death, according to the scriptures. We think, this person died smiling or in his sleep. Outside of someone who's truly a transcendentalist, the actual experience of the soul being torn away from the body is a very painful one, regardless of whether that is reflected in the person's physical expressions or not. Someone might be paralyzed. Even then, the experience of the soul leaving the body is painful because you're being basically kicked out of your home. Just like if someone were to come to my home and then gag me and blindfold me and then kick me out of my home. I wouldn't be able to scream. I wouldn't be able to see anything. But does that mean it would be a peaceful departure from my home? No, not at all. In fact, it would be quite the opposite. It would be even more painful. You cannot express yourself. And being surrounded by people you love saying, please don't go, we don't want you to leave, that's even worse. So in scriptures it's described that a person who leaves in a lonely place is very, very fortunate. If anyone should be there, only those persons who are encouraging that person to chant and remember Krishna, chant his holy names. In fact, during this whole incident, my grandmother came running to see what had happened. And in hindsight, I was shocked at her behavior. As she came to the room, I told her that it seems like grandfather is leaving. Now, in hindsight, that was a very blunt thing to say, that I think he's dying, because typically you don't say that until the person has actually died. But somehow it just seemed like the right thing to do. And I told her, please remember Krishna and pray to Lord Krishna. And to my amazement, instead of coming and sitting there next to her husband and chanting or whatever, she turned around and went into the temple room and sat in front of the deities, choosing not to be with her husband at that time. This is a marriage of more than 50 years. She got married when she was 14 years old or 13 maybe, to my grandfather. And he was in his 70s, so that's, way more than 50 years. And she turned around, she sat down in front of the deities, and she began praying. I could hear her chanting and praying to her Radha Krishna deities to protect her husband. imagine the conviction it takes to do that, to decide that I have to be detached at this moment and allow my husband to remember Krishna and not me as he's giving up this world. And the best thing I can do for him is also pray to the Lord. So anyway, that all happened. But as soon as the body dies, it's amazing how everything changes. The whole atmosphere now feels of death. All the glory of that person. In one moment, their face, their body, everything is drained. It's very clear. The difference between a living body and a dead one is so clear in one moment. It doesn't take hours of decomposition. Just in a single moment, that distinction is so clear. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada says so many times, and he says here also, that one who doesn't know the difference between a living body and a dead body, who thinks, I am this body, actually that person, he says here, is the greatest fool. He's using very strong language. That person is a cow and a donkey, he says. And we might take objection to that language. But the fact of the matter is that language is not Srila Prabhupada's. It's the Bhagavatam itself, which says, Saeva Gokara. This person is like a cow or an ass. Because it's such an obvious thing. And yet, as Yudhishthira Maharaj says, it's not obvious to anyone in this world. We all think we behave as if this is me. Right? This is it. This body is me. When in fact, the clearest thing in this world is to watch a person die from one moment to another and see how it is so clear, so obvious, that there is nothing consistent between that first moment and the moment after death. Everything has changed in one moment. Everyone's attitude changes. No one is now interested in being around him anymore. Who wants to be around a dead body? A dead body is a cause of fear. It's some lamentation, no doubt. But more people want distance. And immediately the mind settles on not how do I remember or care for this person, but how can we get rid of the body as quickly as possible. And so the body is placed on the ground. In this case, it was always there. But in the Vedic system, the body is placed immediately on the ground to make this point that this person may have been sitting on a throne all his life, but now at death, he is nothing more than dirt. The body is as good as dust. So put the body immediately on the ground, not on a bed, not on anything, on the ground, on the bare floor. And the body is bathed and cleaned and put in white clothes. As Prabhupada is saying in this purport, before the next movement of the sun, the body has to be consumed by fire. So that means if the person has died during the day, by sundown. If a person has died after sundown, then by sunrise. The funeral ceremony has to happen. You know why that quickly? Why should a person be consumed that quickly? Besides the obvious fact that the body is decomposing. Yeah. Good, exactly. It's so that quickly, as quickly as possible, the living entity can be sent off to its next destination, because the natural feature of the living entity, the materialist person, is to be attached to the body. We've been attached for so long to this body. Why would the living entity want to leave at that point? Still, at that point, attachment is there. And in order to encourage the living entity, the spirit soul, to go on and say, okay, you're done here, you have to move. And when the person doesn't move, this is when they become in a condition of a ghost or some kind of disembodied being. It's to say, no, please move on, right, at this point. And to help all those left behind also to move on, to realize that this person is now gone. These queens here, being described in this verse, weren't able to do that, did not do that. And so their lamentation only got worse. It only increased because they weren't able to let go. The body, therefore, Prabhupada is saying, whether it's buried or it's cremated, it's meant to be consumed as quickly as possible. It's finished by fire. And typically by fire, cremation, in the Vedic system, because that is the fastest way to get the body back into the various elements and to really make it clear to the living entity. spirit soul, that there is no hope of getting back into this body. Right? You have to move on. Go on to your next destination. Do not linger. Lingering is not good for that person who has died. It's not good for those who are left behind. No one wants to deal with a ghost, and no one wants to be a ghost. Now, when you take the body to the cremation grounds, typically this is done on the banks of a river, if a river is available, a sacred river, if a sacred river is available. But in any case, you build a funeral pyre and place the body upon the pyre, and everyone circumambulates this body to show respect. But that circumambulation, it happens in the opposite direction of what we normally do. So normally we go clockwise, right? In this situation, we go anti-clockwise. The Brahman thread, if one is initiated, is normally placed on the left shoulder, going down. At this point, for all the rituals, the thread is placed on the right shoulder, going in the opposite direction. Normally, when flowers or water is offered, it's offered forward, but in this case, it's offered backward, right, like this, to someone who's passed away. Everything that is done normally in life is done in reverse at death, right, to mark the fact that now the process of birth is being reversed. So at birth, what happens? The various elements, the 5 elements, earth, water, fire, and air, and ether, come together to form the body of a living entity. At death, those 5 elements now have to be sent off into their respective locations. In fact, the yogi, the accomplished yogi at the time of samadhi, when it's time to give up this world, accomplishes this, but without needing to wait until death itself. Right? The yogi's process is basically taking the various elements of the body and on purpose, manually dispersing them into their general categories, right? Earth, water, fire, air, ether, dispersing them, and this causes flames to rise and the body is consumed. So the yogi can do this of his own volition. He doesn't have to wait until the appointed hour of death. But essentially that is the process of death, is reversing the process of life itself. Okay? Now, when you actually take the flame and put it to the funeral pyre, there is no greater moment of detachment that one feels at any point in life. When you see someone you love being burned like wood, right? Just being consumed, the fire just eating up the body that you had loved and embraced and spent time with. And it's at that moment, just for a few moments, that you really realize, yes, I'm not this body. This is the end. This is the condition. This is why in Vedic culture, the dead body is not hidden from view. Death is not something that is taken away and hidden away in a closet, because it's important for everyone to see that and realize there's no difference between that person and me. It's just a matter of time. If this is who I think I am, this is what will happen to me. Surely I'm not that. There's something more to me than that. But the scriptures describe that this type of renunciation unfortunately doesn't last. It's called shmashan vairagya. There are different kinds of vairagya or detachment in this world. Some, for example, are born from frustration. So I have a big argument with my wife. I'm taking sannyas. Right? I've had enough of grihastha life. I'm going to become a renunciate. So this is this type of vairagya is said to be useless because it doesn't last, this renunciation. Right? Then afterwards you feel, okay, she's actually really nice, and she thinks, and you get back together and everything's fine, right? So it doesn't last. There's no consistency there. And then there's markata vairagya, or some show vairagya, where you're trying to learn about how renounced you are and how detached. Again, that type of renunciation feels good for a little bit because people say, wow, look at him, he's really austere. He doesn't have any breakfast. But then how long are you going to keep that going? Tomorrow you will have breakfast, right? So that type of vairagya not very lasting either. But then there's Shmashan Vairagya, the detachment that a person feels at going to the cremation grounds. That too doesn't last very long. And I've seen that myself. It stays for a few days, it stays for a week, it might stay for a month for those who are very close, but then life moves on and things go right back to normal as if nothing ever happened. And so that in itself should be a reminder to us that no matter how important we think we are in this world, merely a month after a death, the whole world will go on as if nothing ever happened. It's a difficult thing to swallow, because even as we're dying, we're thinking nothing can go on without me. Right? Who will take care? Who will do all of this? Who will do all of that? But after we're gone, the last thing a person wants to think of is you. Right? Okay, maybe 1 or 2 people in your life might keep it up for a year, but especially after the 1-year ceremony. Then mourning is finished officially, and things move on. So therefore, Prabhupada is describing here in this purport that one who doesn't realize the difference between a dead and a living body, who remains attached to the body, that person is no better than a cow or a donkey, he says, an ass. And it's easy to think of them like that, but we have to realize that we are in the same condition, right? Because we behave in ways that make it clear that we think this is me, this body is me. So we too are in that category of cows and donkeys. Right? It's not just some crazy, foolish materialists out there. He's speaking to us, this basic fact that we don't realize, we don't understand, and we behave in this way. One of the things I really appreciate about my spiritual master, Hanumat Preshaka Swami, is in the course of a day-to-day conversation, he's heading off in the airplane, say, Maharaj, have a safe journey. You never know, we may die in the plane, right? And he'll drop something like that, which if you're familiar with Indian culture, you know that speaking of death is considered to be inauspicious. Don't say that. Don't say you'll die or something. He'll even say it to his disciples. He'll say, we'll never know, we'll see you in case you're still alive. Right? And from a cultural standpoint, you think, oh my God, that's horrible. But in fact, from a materialist point of view, I want to keep this body as long as possible. From a spiritualist point of view, this is something that we have to remind ourselves to know. Okay, life is urgent. Krishna consciousness is urgent. Because every one of us, every moment, this may be the end. In this famous book called the Hitopadesha, written in India as moral stories for children, in the beginning it says that when it comes to matters of learning, education, a person should think that they will live forever. Because the sea of knowledge is endless, and when you start learning, there's so much more to learn. So if you think about time, you'll get discouraged. Yeah. You started reading Bhagavatam, you think, wow, 12 cantos, how am I ever going to get through? It's okay, you've got a life to do this, just read, right? Or just study. A child begins to study so much. I see my kids, learning ABCs. I feel sorry for them. Do you know how much work you have ahead of you? From ABCs to actually becoming an educated person? Wow, you think back at what you've been through and you think, I never want anyone else to go through it. And yet, they have to, right? They have no choice. So in matters of learning, one should think that you're going to live forever. But, the Hitopadesha says, in matters of spiritual life, one should think that the jaws of death are already clamped around one's neck. And at any moment, they will close and we're done. Right? It's over. Because only then will we develop the urgency for spiritual life, for Krishna consciousness. If this were my last day today, would I be ready? Would I be in a condition to go? There's one devotee I know in Nairobi in Kenya, where my wife is from. And he was a very nice devotee, an older gentleman, and trying hard, initiated. But, sometimes his sadhana and his chanting would waver a little bit. It wasn't so steady. And at one point, he had a very close encounter with death. And after he recovered, fortunately he did, they were taken to the hospital and so on, very close, he called up the temple president, Umapati Prabhu, And he said, I have to speak to you right now. Please, I have to speak to you. And he said, okay, I'm coming over. And he came over and said, how are you? How are things? And have you recovered? And he didn't want to talk about all of that. He said, while I was near death, I saw this whole experience of going into this very, very frightening place and seeing some very frightening people who were ready to tear me apart. But they didn't. They let me go. They let me come back. Because they said, because you have the shelter of a spiritual master, and because we respect him, we'll give you a second chance. But don't mess it up this time. And when he came back, after that point, oh boy, his Krishna consciousness doesn't waver this much. He's completely fixed. It's like the story of Ajamil. And in fact, these types of stories you hear from devotees a lot, but they're actually very common. In fact, even in the medical community, I forget, there's this book that someone wrote, and I don't remember the name. But it's very common that they will talk about how near death, a person will become delusional. And consistently all over the world, they see visions of frightening people coming and taking them from one place to another. And they figure that this must be some, delusional state that the mind enters during that moment of deprivation. But we understand, why is this consistently happening to people all over the world? Even those who are not devotees, they experience this. Because that is the moment of death, right? That's what's happening at that time. The Yamadutas come, they take the person. But for a devotee, we're given a chance, we're given a second chance. It's a chance that we should not waste, right? That's the urgency of Krishna consciousness. We shouldn't waste this opportunity because who knows, at any moment we may be taken away, even if we're young, right? Even if we're young. All those people in that flight, the German Wings flight, who knew, right? That they were climbing an airplane for the last time in their life. That the pilot would go crazy and ram their jet into the Alps, into a mountain. No one knows, right? No one can predict. There were 16 high school kids there. And those kids had a whole life in front of them to live still. And yet it was cut short, just like that. Right? So this is our moment. We have to think, okay, if this is my last day, am I ready? And we can't say, I will be ready. We have to be ready. It has to be Krishna consciousness has to be part of our operating system. It has to be so down below, right, in the lowest levels of our hardware, of our operating system, of our whole constitution, that we don't have time to think about Krishna, you see? At death, you cannot think. Think in the sense of, okay, so, just like we think, right? I have to give a lecture today at IIT, so I'll go and think. So what should I say? Let me plan properly. And this is the points I want to make. When death shows up, we won't have that luxury to go, okay, so death is here now. What did it say in the Gita I have to do? Okay, I should remember Krishna. Now, should I remember Kishore Kishori or Gornitai? Well, probably let's try for Mahaprabhu first, and then I'll go. You don't have time to contemplate, to analyze, right? It has to be, just like when they do military training. They train a person to a point, or when they do a doctor's training, that when the moment comes and you're being shelled from all directions, your reflexes, or for an airplane pilot, when you're heading down, your reflexes has to be so good that when your brain's not working, because for any human being, the brain will freeze up. Right? It won't work in a moment of that much intensity and fear. That something much deeper, we might call it reflex or habit or the operating system or whatever, will kick in so that we have no choice but we just go through what we need to go through. That's the level at which Krishna needs to be in our hearts. That's the level. That when we can't think, then the name of Krishna immediately comes out of our mouth. That yes, I know what to do exactly. I have no choice but to think of Krishna. And that takes practice. Right? That's what we practice every day. We practice in the mornings for 2 hours in the morning program. That's what we practice during the day, in the evenings, at work. In all of these situations, life is a testing ground for that final exam. If we get busy at work and we forget Krishna, imagine how busy we will be at the moment of death, when all of our senses are shutting down. then what will we do? We get sick, we have trouble chanting our rounds, isn't it? Because the senses aren't, the body isn't working, it's aching. Do you know how much the body will ache at the moment of death? And how much our senses will shut down? You see, so Krishna gives us practice points. And as we get older, the tests become more intense. Right? The pain of the body increases. Why? Because as you become as an advanced student, the tests have to go stronger, right? Because it's coming close. So first, as a young man, you practice chanting your rounds when you've got a fever. Okay? So that's difficult, isn't it, to do? But as you become an old person, you might practice with a fever and with pneumonia at the same time, and with a broken knee and a backache, all at the same time. And that's Krishna's mercy, right? Saying, here it comes, right? Let's crank up the intensity so that you're prepared. Let's see if you can do it at this point. Okay, good, very good, you did it. Now let's crank up the intensity a little bit more. Okay, let's give you a near-death experience and see if you can remember me then. Like my grandfather, he had a heart attack first time around. I'm sure it helped him, right? Prepare for the real thing. He got a second chance. So Krishna does that for a devotee. The whole lifetime is that opportunity to prepare for that moment. Like I was saying yesterday, one lifetime, right? Krishna gives us this one lifetime, and he prepares us as best we can for that moment. So let's take advantage of that opportunity and do our best to prepare. So I will stop here. I forget now, was it 8:30 or 8:15? 8:30, okay, good. So a few minutes for questions. Let's start from left to right again here. Yes.
How is that a yogi, sometimes they wait for some particular time to leave up their body. Like, Chandrayaan or something like that. So, is it not that considered they are doing some suicide? They move their life force to the Brahmarandra. In Bhagavatam it is stated. And that particular time they depart their body from their body. So, this is a...
Yes, you see, there's a very big difference between suicide and a yogi choosing his own time of departure. Suicide is basically the product of a giving up, of failing in the world. A person feels that they have no hope, they're giving up on this life, right? Whereas a yogi leaves this world as a victor, being victorious. He has conquered over the material elements and is choosing to depart, to leave at a particular time. So there's a huge difference in the causes and the mental state and the motivation between suicide and a yogi leaving the body at a particular time. So that's one point. The other point to remember is that the yogi chooses the time of departure when the point of death is anyway coming very close. So instead of being forced to be kicked out, the yogi says, I'm going to leave. Just like if you're renting an apartment, right, and your lease is coming up to an end. If you were to leave 6 months before your lease ends, people would say, that's a little foolish. You're still going to have to pay rent for 6 months and you're leaving early. That's like suicide, right? You've left too early. You still have to suffer the karma that you were meant to suffer during that particular lifetime. It'll just come with you. You still have to pay the rent. But if your lease is coming up and there's just a week left for you to stay, then a person would say, okay, start packing up and going the day before the lease expires, right? To wait until the police show up to evict you, that's considered a little foolish, right? So most of us, we don't leave early. Fortunately, we're not in that bad of a condition, right? That is a terrible sin to commit suicide. But fortunately, most of us don't leave early, but we do end up waiting till we're evicted, until we're kicked out by the police from the body. And that's not how the transcendentalist leaves. A transcendentalist sees that, okay, my lease is up anyway. I'm going to die any time now. Let me now prepare for that time, basically. So it's preparation for the inevitable. It's not bringing on the death. It's preparing for the inevitable moment of death. Okay, and that's the yogi's accomplishment, to say, okay, I'm going to choose my time. And selecting that time is a mechanical process, essentially, for ensuring a better destination. Just like if I want to go to back to Salt Lake City, to Utah, as I will today, right? Then I have to go to the airport, But I'm not just going to show up to the airport at any time and say, okay, let's go to Utah. That would be foolish, right? I'm going to go to the airport at a specific time when the flight to Utah leaves at that time. If I'm going to Los Angeles, I would choose a different time when the flight for Los Angeles leaves. So when the yogi is wanting to go to the moon planet, he will choose a specific time where the flight for the moon leaves. As in, the channels of transfer of the subtle body to the moon are open at that moment. And if he wants to go to the sun or to Indraloka, he will choose a specific time when the channels to that destination are open, so the soul can be carried on the channels of prana, of the subtle winds that run through this universe and provide the means of conveyance from one place to another. Right? But the transcendentalist, Krishna makes clear in chapter 8 of the Bhagavad Gita, doesn't care about that, because the channels to the spiritual world are always open. Right? They're always open. It's based on a person's consciousness and readiness to go, not on the time of departure.
Now, one more question. Thing is that why the body of sannyasi is not put on fire, but they put in samadhi?
Two reasons. From the perspective of someone who is transcendentalists, right? They have already given up attachment to the body, even while alive. And so the urgency, first of all, to get rid of the body to help that person move on is not there anymore. So from the perspective of the person who's left the body, they don't need to be told, okay, you should move on, because they're already detached at that point. But then on the second point, then the body becomes spiritualized by constant use in Krishna's service. It becomes like a sacred object, just like we would not take the flowers offered to the deity and just throw them in the dustbin, right, in the trash, because it would be a disrespectful thing to do. So in the same way that the people who are left behind show respect to the fact that this body is actually Mahaprasad now. Right? It's something that has been offered to the Lord and is left behind. So let us honor it properly, rather than, we may have to, yes, get rid of it, right? But let us do it with some honor. Just like when we have flowers offered to the deities, instead of putting them in the dumpster outside, we dispose of them respectfully, right? You can put them in the ground, you can burn them, you can throw them separately, but you do something a little bit different to show respect. So in the same way, to the body of the self-realized person, that body, by virtue of being used in Krishna's service, like flowers, they become Mahaprasad. And so we dispose of it respectfully in a little way that's different. But essentially the point is, it doesn't matter. Prabhupada in this purport is saying, whether one buries or cremates the body, it should be done before sundown or sunrise. So Prabhupada is he's expressing, okay, some cultures they bury, so fine, no problem. The point is basically the same, essentially. It's not a big deal. It's not a huge deal, the difference.
And one more comment. Comment is just to add on. That Prabhupada also mentioned somewhere in purport, I have read in Bhagavatam, that if a person dies in daytime, he is considered as a pious soul. And if a person dies in night time, he is impious, like a sinful person.
Yes. So all of these things, they make a difference by and large, in general, in sort of in the life of a yogi who's trying to elevate himself to the heavenly planets. But for a devotee, all of these considerations don't matter, day or night. Just like Krishna says, those who leave during the sun's northern course are pious, and they go upward, right? Those who leave during the southern course go downward. Now, the sun's northern course, you know how long it lasts? 6 months. And the southern course? 6 months, right? So, it means what? That everyone born in 6 months' time is going upward? Okay, in some sense, yes, right? But that for a devotee is not the big criteria. Okay, means there are so many factors. Sun's northern course, yes, but if you've committed so many sinful activities, no, you're not going up, you're going down, right? So when all things are equal, for a yogi who's actually practicing this technology of yoga, of death, that for that yogi, these are all things that matter, right? But then Krishna says, for a devotee, just a few verses later, he says, don't worry, Arjuna, because Arjuna's on a battlefield. What time he gets killed, he doesn't know, right? For a soldier on the battlefield, you might get shot now, it's not the right time. You can't wait, you're dying. So he says, it's okay. Don't worry, Arjun. Just do what I'm saying. Take shelter of me and you'll be fine. Remember me, he says. You'll be fine.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
You mentioned this point that in learning one should think he's living forever, and in spiritual matters he should think he's dying immediately, or at least the potential is there. So also in devotional service there's urgency in the sense that death can come at any time, but also there's like unlimited service to do, so one must always be thinking ahead and making plans and maintain enthusiasm also, not like, oh well, anyway I might die any moment, so what's the use of doing anything practical for Krishna. So there are these two kind of polar opposites that one ideally would be able to maintain simultaneously. At least it seems to me. But could you say a little bit about this? How to reconcile those
It's a very
two?
good point. See, a devotee should make plans to serve Krishna and make goals to serve Krishna and endeavor to serve Krishna as if he's going to live forever. Okay, just like you saw Srila Prabhupada, right? He started the Srimad Bhagavatam translation project in his 70s. When someone would say, "Really, your lifetime's work you're starting now?" But no, okay, I have all the time in the world. It's up to Krishna, right? When I'll leave. So we should make plans and have enthusiasm to serve Krishna as if we're going to be on this planet forever. But we should do that service with intensity as if we're going to die tomorrow. Right? So in other words, the perspective has to be for long term, but the mood of the service has to be, Krishna, I'm doing this for you because this may be the last thing I do for you. Right? So with that mood of surrender we have to do, that we hope we want to cultivate for the moment of death. So both of those things have to be there. Right? The mood has to be one of intensity, but the desire to serve has to be endless. Right? Because it is endless. We'll make plans to serve Krishna forever in this life, and even if Krishna cuts it short, we'll continue in our next life to serve Krishna. Neha bhikramanashosti. Right?
I still have one doubt. I appreciate this point, like it's possible. Like, and Prabhupada definitely set that example of up to the very last moment, doing his translation, like, totally in Krishna's hands.
Yes.
Whatever happens. So still there's the tradition in Vedic culture and also examples in previous acharyas of retiring at a certain point. Like, okay, I've done so much up to this point, but like, I better kind of tie up the loose ends and then really devote myself to more kind of meditative, contemplative. And my understanding is that traditionally sannyas as an ashram was meant for that, social suicide. So then one's kind of turning more into an inward cultivation or something like that. What do you think about that?
Yes. Retiring from material life is essential as we prepare, but we retire from material life, not from spiritual life, right? So Prabhupada showed that example. He retired from his material life at the point of 50 or whatever, but then he continued his activity in spiritual life far beyond that. Even the sannyasi, yes, socially, that sannyasi is dead, a civil dead man. He's retired from material world. But spiritually speaking, for a Vaishnava sannyasi at least, one's intensity of, the reason to take sannyas is to redouble one's intensity of service to the Lord, right? So there's no retiring from Krishna's service. In fact, there's the nature of the service may change, no doubt. I mean, you may not run around and eat 50 gulab jamuns as your service anymore because your body can't handle it. But the nature of that service may change, but the quality of the service and the activity of service has to go on, right? It has to go on. Because for a devotee, there's no death. I mean, death is not the end of service. It's in fact just the beginning of better and newer and greater service that a devotee looks forward to after death. Right? So retirement is from material life, and it's essential that a devotee does so, but not from spiritual life. All the great kings and sages, they would leave home to retire from material life, but their service to the Lord would redouble at that point. Thank you all. Okay, last question, and then we end.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for that very nice class. This topic of death sort of reminded me of this verse in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that describes different types of individuals who attained Krishna due to different types of absorptions.
Yes.
So it gives the example of Kamsa, gives the example of the Vrishnis, the Yadus, the Pandavas with their sense of relationship. So it made me, the idea presented at least in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is that at the time of death, the absorption in Krishna is not devoid of an emotional component, that it's combined. And the nature of that emotional component will then determine what kind of birth you get in your next life with Krishna. But sometimes we hear in classes though, and of course that Krishna is independent devotees and he's willing to fulfill his devotees' desires. So like I've heard someone say one time, if you help build a Vedic planetarium, Bhaktivinoda Thakur will come and take you back to Godhead. Or if you spend your whole life just reading books, Lord Chaitanya will take you back to Godhead. And no doubt, the Lord is independent. He could do that also. So this is my question. In preparation for our death, is the idea that we should be trying to cultivate a sense of relationship with Krishna up until, in a very sort of specific and perfected sort of way, or rather, whether that happens or doesn't happen, that's all right. If you just dedicate your life to doing service in the form of book distribution or Harina, whatever your service may be, then at the time of death, it'll all become clear to you. I was just wondering if you could, maybe these are maybe it's the flip side of the same idea, but maybe I'm not able to see the harmony in the ideas. Perhaps you could clear up the story.
So that's a big question. I'll try to answer briefly, but essentially, at some point in our spiritual life, we will realize what is our relationship with Krishna. Okay, now it may happen in this lifetime, it may happen in the next lifetime, it may happen 100 lifetimes from now, it may happen in the material world, it may happen in the spiritual world. But the point is, we will realize our relationship with Krishna. Death holds no particular significance in that matter. In other words, that if we don't realize that relationship in this lifetime, Krishna may reveal it to us at the moment of death, but we may also he may reveal it to us in our next life, or he may reveal it to us on our flight back to Godhead. So death is not, from a devotee's perspective, so everything I've been discussing here is all about the significance of death, right? Because from a practitioner's perspective, that is our perspective, death is something that we prepare for because we want to make sure we don't have to come back into another material body. But from the perfected devotee's perspective, the one who's already established their connection with Krishna or is self-realized, death is nothing more than just a mere transition point. It's just an important milestone, but anything major. And so in Bhagavatam we have the example of Dhruva Maharaj, who stepped onto the head of death as a stepping stone to climb the airplane back to Vaikuntha. So he accepted the fact that yes, I'm dying, but it was nothing more than just a stepping stone. It was a footstool to go back to Godhead. It becomes a useful tool, actually, that a devotee looks forward to. When my Guru Maharaj speaks about dying, he does so in a very excited manner, very happy manner. He says, we go back to Godhead, And it's a little unfathomable for me because it's the last thing I want to hear about. But for myself even, But for him, it's like, oh, who wants to stick around in the material world any longer? He will, as long as Krishna wants him to. There's no question of wanting to leave early, to making yourself leave early. But the point is, for a devotee who's advanced, death is just a stepping stool. That's all it is. It, as far as I know, it doesn't hold any particular significance in terms of revealing our swarupa or anything like that. It's a moment where we hopefully will encounter Krishna rather than the Yamadutas. So, thank you all very much for your attention. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.